Well, hello and welcome to the 2023 Indiana Farmers Market Forum. I'm Christina Ferroli, the Grants Program Coordinator with the Indiana Cooperative Development Center. And I'm introducing Catt Fields-White, who's with Farmers Market Pros. Catt Fields-White is the Director of San Diego Markets and the founder and lead consultant of Farmers Market Pros. Farmers Market Pros promotes financial stability, community engagement, and entrepreneurship for small farmers and food makers and market managers. Online Vendor 101 courses prepare prospective vendors for success with information on product feasibility, preparation, labeling, permits, marketing, and more. Intense is the National Farmers Market Conference, brings farmers market managers and participants from throughout the USA and Canada together for 3 days of speakers, workshops, and roundtables. Catt is the co-host of TED Talk, which is the weekly farmers market podcast and the online Farmers Market Pros community. And she works as a technical advisor for the USDA FMPP grantees. At San Diego Markets, Catt and her team bring farmers to the city and more than 25,000 people to the table weekly by developing and managing multiple weekly year-round farmers markets, including the San Diego County's largest, the 6-block-long Little Italy Mercato. A former restaurant owner, marketing manager, and publisher, Catt writes and speaks about food, farms, and business for regional and national publications and at conferences and events worldwide. She advocates for small farmers and markets as a steering committee member of the California Alliance of Farmers Markets and a member of the National Farmers Market Coalition Forum. Her dedication to local food systems is inspired and motivated by her 9 grandchildren and her determination to preserve healthy food options for them and for coming generations. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I want to remind everyone to please remain muted during the presentation. Please feel free to drop your questions into the chat and we will have time for a Q&A at the end. Toward the end of the presentation, I will drop the link for an evaluation survey that we would love for you to complete on the session. Thank you.
All right, are we ready? So I've noticed on your agenda that I'm listed as a vendor segment. So I would love to just get kind of an idea of how many of the folks that are on right now are vendors and how many are managers. So if you want to just drop something in the chat, or Christina, if you can kind of give me a heads up on that. We're going to talk about vendor training and the vendor training program that we developed and that we're developing now for some other markets across the country as sort of white label custom programs for people in other areas outside of San Diego. We do have a lot of folks that sign up for the current vendor course online that are from outside of California, but we're developing some that are a little bit more specific for various areas. So I'm going to treat this as though I'm talking to vendors and to managers that want to know how to train vendors, unless you give me a signal that that is not the kind of audience that we've got. If it's all vendors, we'll talk a little bit different.
We have a little bit of a mix, but most are market managers at the moment.
Mostly market managers. Okay, cool. So I will talk about how we develop the vendor training program, what we teach our vendors, and why it's important to train your vendors in terms of retention and making sure that you've got vendors that are going to succeed. It's to nobody's benefit to have a vendor come in and out of your market without being a happy person and without succeeding at their business. So we spend a lot of time in our organization and on the grander scale through Farmers Market Pros to make sure that vendors get the training they need to succeed. So what we found when we started managing markets is that farmers are really excited about farming, and food makers are really excited about what they make. And we finally developed the sense that people were jumping into markets because they were really excited about getting their product out there, getting their produce out there because of the financial advantages of selling direct to consumers. It was important. And many of them just didn't have the business skills to make sure that they succeeded. And so we developed our program of training farmers, small food makers, other vendors to create successful vendors. Our motto at that time, and we still preach it, is passion meet profit. So it's really exciting to make a family recipe and get it out there to people. It's very exciting to take the crops that you raise and get them on the table at the farmer's market. But if you don't understand some business basics or how to make the most of your space at the market, it can also be a very painful process. If you've owned a small business and you've ever owned a small business that didn't succeed, you know that's a really sad thing. It's also not good for your market. It's demoralizing for other vendors. It's sad for customers who get attached to a product and then can't find them because the vendor's gone out of business because they don't know how to create a successful business in addition to having a lovely product. So our focus typically when we're training vendors is to make sure that they understand business, costing, how to make sure that they're making a profit, how to market themselves and their products so that they can make sure they do make a profit. And typically I should have done a little housekeeping when I'm presenting, absolutely no problem with somebody popping in with a question. So Christina, if you've got a compelling question that comes up in the chat and you want to throw it out there while I'm speaking, just holler at me. And otherwise we'll plan on a robust session of questions and answers at the end. So we opened our markets in 2008. By 2010, we could see that this was a problem. And so we created what we called the Vendor 101 course. And it was designed to be a classroom course. We taught it over a full day. It was 5.5 hours plus lunch to teach people all the basics they needed to get started in farmers markets and to succeed in farmers markets. What we told them was there were 2 perfectly good outcomes that could come from that class. Number one, they decided they did want to be in farmers markets. This was a great way to make a living. This was a terrific way to get their produce or their product out to the public, and they'd know how to do it. California in particular is heavily regulated. The permits are complicated. You can maybe figure out how to do it yourself by scrolling through 15 different websites and making some calls. What we wanted to do was consolidate it all in one day and explain that if your product meets this criteria, you need this permit. If you're a farmer, you need this certification. These were the other licenses that you needed, how to obtain insurance, all the nuts and bolts. The other perfectly good outcome from sitting in that classroom for the day was that you realized that even though you make great brownies and everybody tells you should share them, it's a lot more work than you think. Being in a farmer's market involves regulatory issues. It takes some money. Certainly easier to start a business at a farmer's market than to open a brick and mortar in terms of cost and commitment level, but it's not free. It's not a hobby. It's not a bake sale. There's a lot to be done if you're going to commit to making money at a farmer's market. So many people would sit through that class and then decide that this wasn't really the best path for them. And that's a great outcome too. We charged for the class. They spent one day, way ahead of spending a year beating your head against this idea and trying to raise money and scraping along and going out of business in the end, or just deciding that it wasn't for you. That's not the kind of lifestyle that you wanted. So that was a great outcome too. And from a manager's perspective, it helped us to kind of shake out who was really had the energy, had the ability, their product had the feasibility for making money. It made sense for them to be in the market, and weeding all that out before people came into the market was a great idea. So education as part of the application process is great for prospective farmers and vendors. It lets them determine whether they've really got a profitable product. Do they really have the time to devote to it to make it happen? Do they have the funds to launch successfully? It's also terrific for managers, because if you've ever gotten a phone call that said, hey, I want to be in the farmer's market, how does that work? You know that that's not a 2 or 3 minute conversation. And the reason we actually started the class was in defense of staff time. We were spending lots and lots of time answering those basic questions for people, some of whom would go forward into the markets, many of whom, once they received that information, would not. It would become clear to them that this wasn't the best fit for them. And meanwhile, we were investing a ton of staff time. So it came to us that if we put everybody in one room, let them answer all the basic questions, covered what they were going to need, screened out the people that either just were not ready to launch financially or didn't have the time available, or their product, when you added up the numbers, just would not yield a profit for them. We were able to spend more time then on the people that really were moving forward. Once they'd gone through the basic class, we invest a lot of time in answering questions, screening, labeling, giving them advice, helping them figure out the best way to display. But this sort of knocked out those basic questions at the beginning and let us really focus on the people that were ready to go forward. We've also found, now that we've been doing this for, well, we started in 2010, so more than a dozen years, that our folks that started at Vendor 101 are almost without fail more successful than people that were not educated before they got into the market. So at this point, we've got a fair amount of data on how much you can increase the chance of success by educating people before they start. So that saves them a lot of heartache, saves them a lot of money. It minimizes their investment in determining that feasibility of whether their product's going to make it or not. So we really find it a win-win for everyone. We had talked for a long time about taking that out of the classroom and putting it into an online program. And what forced us to do that, of course, was COVID. So we could no longer put 20 people in a classroom and talk to them for 5 hours, couldn't scrunch people that close together. So we did invest in creating a strong online version of the class. It's 7 modules. Each of those modules runs from 15 to 25 minutes. And then there's homework with each one. We can watch how people are progressing through the class. And our application now has a box on it to check to say, have you completed the Vendor 101 program? We do a live online Q&A for everybody that has finished the online program. And we're finding it very valuable now to provide that to other market organizations. So we just finished a custom program for the Koppel Farmers Markets in Dallas. We're working on one in Ohio and one in DC. And those managers are finding that valuable as well. So we start out our class with background on farmers markets, an explanation that farmers markets are not flea markets and farmers markets are not makers market pop-ups, that they really are focused on the farmers, because that's our view. We also explain that there are many farmers markets that will have a farmer or two, but will actually include a lot more food and a lot more crafts than farms, and that's all right. Oftentimes when we're going through this class, we're talking about what we do at our markets, what's available at other markets. Make sure you make the right choice so that you fit where you are. Our definition of farmers markets is one that's focused on farmers, and we believe that they exist so that farmers can keep farming because of the increased financial stability of being able to sell direct to consumer and keep their retail price. Once we run through the whole idea of how farmers markets started and what their function is, we get into the permits required wherever the prospective farmer or vendor is living, what kind of insurance is required and why insurance is required, what level of liability you have if you're not insuring your business, and then how farmers markets choose and curate their product mix so that people get an idea of, are they producing something that's oversaturated? Are they producing something that farmers market managers are going to jump up and down to see when that application comes in? We then get into product development. We're not designing people's businesses. We're not designing their product, but we are helping them understand what's going to make a successful product and what's not. So we heavily get into differentiation. Obviously, if you've got 17 juice vendors applying, you're going to have to do something different with your juice to come in. If you walk through a market, you'll find, in our case, a whole lot of baked goods, some yogurt, some granola. And so we advise strongly to prospective vendors and farmers to get out to the markets and look at what's prevalent in their area and in the markets they'd like to participate in, and then think about how their products are different. Obviously, market managers, when they're curating the markets, can't just duplicate products over and over and over. You're looking for a balanced market. You're trying to create a grocery store in the street. And so that's not apparent to people who have not functioned in the market world. So we get very deeply into product differentiation, what you can do to differentiate your product, whether it's the ingredients, whether it's how you market it, whether it's how you package it. We have a financial feasibility worksheet that we supply to vendors before they get started with us. It's a very simple costing exercise in which they enter each ingredient. We remind them that they have to include the cost of packaging, that they've got to include the cost of their kitchen or storage area and what they're paying for rent there, that they need to amortize market space rent, that they need to pay themselves, which is the big one that most small businesses miss. It's sweat equity, kind of. If you're not paying yourself, you are never going to be able to grow, since you're probably going to have a tough time hiring employees to replace you and do what you do unless you're willing to pay them. And if you're not paying yourself, you've got to bring an income somewhere. So you're not getting a true cost of your product in order to establish the price of your product, unless you're counting what you're spending in terms of time that you should be getting paid for. Doesn't necessarily have to be what you'd like to make ultimately, but you've got to count for cost of what wages you're losing out on at some other job by packaging your juice, pressing your juice. So we go through that financial feasibility process. And then we explain to people, if you add that up and your cookie has to cost $5.75 to make a profit, you're going to have a tough time when you look at what the comps are available in the marketplace. Farmers market shoppers, we find, are not necessarily there strictly on price. You can charge a little more for a product with great ingredients, but you still have to be within the comparables out there and be within what the market will bear. So if we do the financial feasibility process and it turns out that the ingredients they're using or the scale at which they're producing will not produce a product that can make a profit, we suggest they change the size of the product or look at buying ingredients in larger volumes so they can get a discount, or look at packaging that they can either co-op or change to fit the profitability model. So we go through all of that with them in the class. We look at naming and branding. We certainly don't pick people's names, but we do give them advice on how to choose a name that identifies your product, but also doesn't limit you. If you want to expand your product line and grow, we give them some advice on how to protect their names, how to check to make sure that name's not already owned by somebody else that's going to sue them, because that's a heck of a depressing way to start off your business. So we give them a lot of advice on that. And then we encourage them to run a few names by us if they haven't chosen a business name yet, and let their classroom cohort or some of the managers give them a little bit of feedback on where it's going. We're not lawyers, we're not accountants, but we do have a pretty good knowledge of business formation and business structures. So we do a short section of the class on that, talking about the various ways that you can operate. We don't recommend that they do a sub-S versus a sole proprietorship or a partnership, but we do give them a short course in what the differences are between those legal structures. We talk some about financing. I would say that about half of the folks that come into the Vendor 101 class have established their financing. They know how they're going to pay to open their market business. The other half don't. And so we give them some ideas on that, a little bit about crowdfunding, but not as much as we used to. Crowdfunding is not quite the source of revenue for new food making markets that it used to be. We talk about the possibility of small business loans, or the possibility of using things like Axion or Kiva that are no interest loans for very small businesses. We also talk about friends and family financing and what they need to do to protect themselves in that situation and to assure that they're going to have a pleasant Thanksgiving in years to come. So it's all about communicating with your friends and family when they're investing in your business. We talk about the simple contracts and agreements that you can do, not so much to put yourself in a position of suing or being sued, but again, so that your investors and you all have the same ideas about how they're going to get paid back, how you're going to get paid for operating the business, and what to do if it doesn't work out and you want to split up, who gets what. Always a good idea to have that prenup with your investors. We talk about the application process, how farmers and small food makers can choose a market that's going to be best for them, how to complete the actual application, in what order you want to do all that, at what point do you want to apply to a market. Are you going to apply 6 months ahead? Probably not. Most managers aren't going to know what space they have available that far in advance. Are you going to apply after you've started a social media account so that the farmers market manager can see more about your products? Are you going to apply when you've already got packaging and labeling in place, in case you've got a manager like me that wants to see samples of your product and make sure that your labeling is legal, that it's clean, that it's attractive? We put together a sampling panel when we do our application process so that a variety of people can speak to whether or not they'd buy that product if it was at the market, so that we can, again, make sure that we're bringing people into the market that have a high chance of succeeding. That's our goal. We advise them to tell a story. If they can tell us a story about why their product's been created, is it an old family recipe? Did they start the product because they had a child that was celiac and they needed to develop gluten-free options? Are they growing on land that's been in their family for generations? Are they growing on land that they've co-opted with a number of other small farmers to try to change how healthily the growing methods are used in their area. Anytime they can tell us a story on the application, we figure they can tell a story to shoppers at the market, and that's going to increase their chance of success. So we talk about all the ways that you can make sure that your application is accepted, that you're a good prospect for the markets that you're applying to. We talk about timing and fees and how long a commitment you should make to a new market, that it's going to cost you to be there, the different types of fee structures that various markets may have, whether it's flat fee, whether it's season in advance, whether it's a percentage of your sales. The idea, obviously, of the whole class is to make sure that people are prepared. There's nothing particularly good or particularly bad about the various ways that markets are run, as long as everybody knows what the rules are and how it's going to affect their business coming in. Then we start to talk to them about marketing, preparing the launch, how they share the news of their market. What we say about marketing is everywhere all the time. So we encourage them to have social media accounts and to think about starting a mailing list at their booth where they can build a list to do a newsletter, and thinking about maybe small ads and thinking about flyers and how they design their banners so that they can really get the word out there. And we find that the marketing section in particular has been extremely successful for vendors that are already in markets. So a lot of our Vendor 101 classes, and we should probably design one that's called 201, but pretty much tells you exactly the same thing, are used by people that are already in markets, especially when we're doing a custom program on Vendor 101 that's going out to other markets. What we find is they'd like to use it the way we use it for prospective vendors, but they'd also really like to educate their existing vendors to let them know what kind of marketing will be the most effective for them. We'll let them know what kind of operations at the market will be the most effective for them. We'll let them know some of the basics like fundraising, if they want to expand their line, or if they want to go into more markets, or if they want to look at adding on a wholesale line. All those things can be helpful to people that are already operating in a lot of markets. We love this person's Instagram. It shows you every market they're at. They alternate this with Instagram posts that focus on a single market. If you're a market manager here, you know that you probably want to repost the social media posts from folks that are talking about your market, and you might not want to repost one that talks about 9 other markets. So we encourage them to do both. We help them develop a social media schedule so that they've got a good idea of what's the most effective timing in terms of posting before markets. The secret weapons, of course, are making sure that every single post you do tells people where you are and when you're there. We cannot say often enough that you want to include some way to contact you, whether it's a website or a link tree that connects people with you. We tell markets and vendors alike to be sure to mention the market that they're at, where it's located. Please, please, please put the city and state on your Instagram bio so that people know if you're something that they should be looking for, or if you're across the country. Be sure to post over and over and over about the actual address and times that your market is happening, or the market that you're vending in is happening. Can't emphasize enough. I keep saying that I'm going to do a marketing session someday where I come out and I say, put the place and the time and the day of your market on your Instagram and everything else you produce. And then I'm just going to drop the mic and walk away, because that's absolutely the most basic way to make sure that you succeed. People have a lot of input going on, and if you don't remind them of where you are, they will not find you. Use multiple platforms. There's a whole bunch of people out there, and just like there's a lot of different methods of learning, there's a lot of different methods of keeping up on what's happening in your world. So there's people that only look at Facebook, and there's people that only look at Instagram, and there's people that wouldn't touch social media with a 10-foot pole, and you can reach them by doing advertising in very local publications, or you can do it by printing flyers that you take to your local coffee shop and to your local gym, or you can do it by collecting names and putting out a regular, predictable email newsletter. Doesn't have to be long, needs to be consistent. Cross-marketing with other businesses and other vendors in the market is really helpful. We encourage vendors who are using local ingredients in their foods, which we highly encourage, to post that at their booths to say, this sauce has chickpeas from Fava Farms in them. This hot dish that I'm serving is using tomatoes today from JR Organics, and it's using collard greens from Indian Summer Farm. And we encourage vendors to trade back and forth in terms of sampling. Our tomato vendor uses our salt vendors' sea salts on their tomatoes, and they both throw people across the aisle. So cross-marketing can be really effective, making sure that your market manager has your social media handles and can tag you in their posts and you can tag them in yours. Very effective. You're expanding your audience on both ends. So we look a lot at marketing partners. Do we get local businesses in to talk about how they buy strawberries at the market and use it in their cocktails? Do we get the gym down the street to talk about how much healthier you'll be if you not only take classes, but you eat healthy foods? And we mention them in our media posts. So marketing partners can be incredibly effective. Look for all the ways that you can synchronize what your messaging is with what somebody else's messaging is. Our most valuable vendors, we call it the 4Ps, and I've seen so many 4Ps, 3Ps, 6Ps kind of things coming out from different marketing places, but we've been talking about this for a while. What makes a successful vendor is obviously a really good product. You can sell a mediocre product once, you're not going to keep selling a mediocre product. Once somebody's tried it, you want them to keep coming back. You've got to make sure your product is good. That's not enough though. You've also got to have great packaging, great signage so that people know what they're looking at, they know what they're looking for, they know what's in the package, and folks buy with their eyes first. So if you've got a package that stands out, if you've got a great logo that's memorable so they can find you again next week, that's a big part of making your product a success. Personality is key at farmers markets. Otherwise, people would buy off the shelf in a grocery store. The reason people shop at farmers markets is because they want to know who produces their food. The reason people come back and buy that product again and again is because they develop a personal relationship, at least in their minds, with the person that's selling the product. So putting it out there, getting to know your customers, making sure that you're standing up and not sitting back in the corner on your phone is all really important to making sure that your product sells and that it keeps selling and that people are happy to see you at the market. And then professionalism is that part where you stay in your booth during the day, you arrive on time, you cooperate with your fellow vendors so that they push people towards you and you push people towards them. You notify your farmers market manager if you're going to be out. All of those things, that it's just a professional way to do business. And we're very clear with our farmers and vendors when they start that we expect that consideration and that we'll give them professional consideration in return. And then making the most of your booth. This is a big one for brand new vendors, but it's also a good one to remind your current vendors to look at. So there's no sense in paying for a booth for a market that's open for 5 or 6 hours and then being out of the booth wandering around most of the time, or not making sure that you have enough inventory to sell, or not making your display effective. So we look at a number of different things, especially if somebody's got lagging sales, or if they're just starting and they're really excited and they want to hear about what they can do to make their sales better, or if they're an experienced vendor that is excited and wants to make their sales better. A lot of times you'll see that when somebody new in that family or that organization comes into the market, they want to know how they can do better. First thing, of course, is display. So an abundant display is really important when you're marketing to American consumers. We're used to buying from big piles of things. We don't want to take what's left over. We want to have choices. It's good to make sure you've got a variety of products. We have successful vendors that sell a single sauce, but they've morphed that into a mild sauce and a medium sauce and a hot sauce, or a red sauce and a white sauce. Even if you've got a really limited product line, we usually encourage people to have at least 3 options because we know that consumers like to have choice. So keeping your display full, cleaning and contracting as you go through the day, checking out your display to make sure that there's not plastic bags laying in the front. Nobody's going to want to take a picture of that and Instagram it. They're going to want to see your product front and center. As you're running out of inventory, you want to contract during the day, build up an abundant look again of what's left. Make sure that your display is not looking sparse or picked over. So that's important when it comes to displaying. Eye contact and recognition. We talked about that a minute ago, a little bit, but this is critically important. Standing up and making eye contact, remaining at eye level with your customers is one of the absolute biggest things you can do to increase your sales at farmers markets. Customer recognition is really important. And when we say that, we mean 2 different things. One is recognizing that this is a human that's walking through the market, that's happy to be there, that may have other things on their mind, and just calling out, hey, love that sweater. Terrific scarf. Good morning. Great weather today, isn't it? Is the sun amazing? So recognizing that you've got things in common, that you're members of the same human race in the same community is really important. Just giving them that word will make them pause. And then the other half of recognition is, oh, for goodness sakes, pay attention to who your regular customers are that are coming back. My daughter's biggest pet peeve is going to a vendor that she's bought from 10 times and they still say, hi, what can I get for you? As opposed to, oh, you like your green juice without bananas, right? Keeping those things in mind, even if you have to keep a little notebook and make notes to yourselves about your customers so that you recognize them when they come back, huge way to boost your sales. Inventory is critically important. So one of our rules at our market is you have to have product on the table until we close at 2 o'clock. If you've designed things perfectly, you only have one thing on the table at 1:55, so that you're not taking home waste, so that you're not overproducing things that you can't sell. But at the same time, you have to make the customer experience for the person that leaves their kid's soccer game and rushes to the market to get there 20 minutes before they close, they need to find the same things on the table that people found at 8 in the morning. If not, they will go to grocery stores where that is the situation. Grocery stores don't run out of food before 2 o'clock. You've got to make sure that you bring enough inventory, partly to make the customers happy and keep them coming back, and partly to not waste your time at the market. Every once in a while, somebody will miscalculate and they run out of food, they run out of produce, they run out of jam 2 hours before the market closes. And once in a while, that's okay. But even then, it's sad because they're leaving so much money on the table for that last 2 hours in the market. People are coming by, they're eager to buy their products, they've run out. So we strongly encourage people to really inventory up. And then we talk to them about if they're inventorying and having too much at the end of the market, let's talk about how you start counting that, how you start recording data so that you got a good sense of what you're going to sell and what you're not. Everybody has a weird day that just doesn't match up with their data, doesn't match up with their records. But mostly we want to figure out how to make that happen. And then we help people look at what they can maybe do with end of day product. Is there a way to reuse that? Is there a value added product to produce from something that's left over at the end of the day? Customer service is important. Nobody likes to go into a store and walk around and be ignored or eyeballed, side-eyed. Customer service is important at the market as well. Asking people if you can help them, asking if you can help them find something in particular, asking if they need some advice on how to use a particular produce item. Anything you can do to create a customer service atmosphere where they're clear that you're there to help them is going to increase your sales. And then some pro tips about displays in particular. We strongly advise that once you set up your display at the market, you step outside of your booth and take a look. Get the customer's view of it. When you're standing inside, sometimes you don't realize that you've got a plastic bag front and center, or that you and your staff have your water bottles scattered through the product and they're distracting. They're taking people's eyes away from the actual product that you're selling. We say get outside the booth and look at it as if you were a 12-year-old. Can you see clearly what's being sold? Do you have price signs and signs that identify the product on each item? The biggest fear of consumers and humans in general is embarrassment. If you are not pricing your products and people are picking things up and then handing them to you and finding out that they cost more than they think, this is what will likely happen. Many times they'll buy it anyway, even if it's more than what they expected it to be. They won't come back because their overall memory of that experience is going to be that they were embarrassed and kind of trapped into doing it so that they didn't look broke or they didn't look like they couldn't afford what they picked up. Put the prices on it, make the pricing structure simple enough that people know what they're getting into before they pick up the product. They will have a fond memory of their transaction and they'll come back again. And that's important. When you're setting up your display, we strongly advise that you leave one spot, typically sort of off to one side, but in the front, not on your hot corner, which is the view that people are going to get as they walk down the aisle. That's where you want to put your best sellers or your products with the best margin. But somewhere along the front of your booth, maybe a little bit off center, you want to leave an empty space. Because folks that don't have anywhere to set down their shopping bag or to set down their reusable coffee cup won't be able to pick up your products to buy them. You've got to make it easy for people functionally, physically, to be able to pick up your products, put them in the bag, hand you the money. And they can't do that if they're trying to juggle their bag and their coffee cup and the things that they've accumulated at the market that day. Be sure that you allow them space to make shopping comfortable. So it's just a few of the pro tips that we provide in our display section of our classes. Banners that make sense and that identify you. Consistent uniforms like these ladies have on at the Smith Farms booth. If you just a simple t-shirt, they're not expensive, but they make everybody look like they're on the same team, and they're one more reminder of who people are buying from. That is our vendor training program, and we're gonna have a lot of time for questions, which is good. Conversation back and forth is what we specialize at. This is me and my team. That's Bridget, that's Justine, that's me. We're at a market in San Diego in this picture. You can find us on Tent Talk, the podcast. That comes out every Monday. We've been doing it. We're now in our 5th year. We're at 220 some episodes. If you're a new vendor, if you're a returning vendor, if you're a market manager that needs some tips, feel free to binge. You can go on Stitcher or Apple, iTunes, Spotify, anywhere podcasts are found, or you can listen to them on YouTube or on our website. But people find those valuable. We get a lot of feedback from it. If you have an idea for a subject you'd like us to cover, by all means, message us on Instagram or pop us an email. Our goal is to make sure that your passion also includes some profit. This is a fun way to earn a living, but you got to earn a living. And happy to take questions, and let's have a chat.
Thanks, Catt. I think you've covered, I didn't see anybody dropping any questions, but they loved a lot of what you said. They really appreciated your points. So please, then, if you guys have a question, please drop it in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute or raise your hand and unmute. That would be okay too. Oh, we do have a question. Are any of your deliverables or resources accessible? They have a March space reservation meeting coming up for their market. So they'd like to maybe go over some points, or.
I mean, you can certainly email us if you need something custom. The Vendor 101 class is online. It is for sale. There's a cost associated with it. Tips, advice, and deliverables. So you could sign up for the Vendor 101 course and take it yourself, and then put it in your own words and pass it on to your meeting. You certainly can pass on the Vendor 101 link to anybody that's interested in taking the class. If you want to email me, if you have some specific questions, happy to help you with that. We do have a newsletter. So if you go to farmersmarketpros.com, I'll drop the link in there. It says subscribe at the top of the page. You can sign up for the newsletter. There's links on that page to sign up for the classes. There's obviously a link to sign up for the conference, which will give you lots of content, not just from us, but from some 25 or 30 other market experts and managers and people that are working in this business and have for a while. And again, go ahead.
TED Talks, TED Talks also has subject-based discussion.
It does, yeah. It's searchable. If you go on our website and look at, that's my email address. If you want to pop me, if you have a specific question, I'm happy to chat with you about that. If you have a long series of questions and need consulting, there's a button on there that you can press where you pay for a little bit of time. Tent Talk is searchable if you go onto our website. And let's see, probably the easiest way to get you there is this, tenttalkpodcast.com. If you go onto our website and look at it there is a search bar. I don't think it's as robust to search as I wish it was, and we're working a little bit on that now, but a lot of times you can drop in a topic and it'll come up with a specific Tent Talk episode. There are a lot of episodes. There's over 200 of them. They're each about 45 minutes to an hour. So it'll take you some time. So if you're looking for a particular answer or some information on a particular subject, searching may be your best way to go. Otherwise, when you're in the kitchen, when you're on the road, by all means, binge along. There's plenty to learn there.
There was a question about social media. Any recommendations for social media optimization for vendors and managers?
Yeah, and if that person, I guess I'd like a rephrase of that question. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by optimization. We do not typically do paid social media. I know some people have a lot of luck with that. we find that the best way to amplify social media is to tag people, whether it's our local business association, whether it's the vendor or farmer themselves that we're talking about, whether it's a combination, all of the above. The joy of social media, the effectiveness of social media is based on the idea that it's a spider web, and that the more you can tag other people, the more reach you'll get, since you're getting to their audience as well. And if M. Harold is on here and wants to elaborate on that question, you're happy to talk about that too. Oh, she says great answer, or he says great answer, one of those folks. I advise vendors to get their signs off of the front of the table, 1 or 2 people, and your sign is blocked. Oh, okay. So if you mean the banner, for instance, that has their name on it, absolutely with you on that. I come in with, we have vendors come in every once in a while that will have their signage with their name and their product on their tablecloth. They have a lovely branded tablecloth. Absolutely useless once the market's rolling, because people standing in front of it then of course block it from everybody else to see it. We advise vendors to use 2 signs. One, a fairly shallow sign, maybe 9 inches deep, that goes across the front of their booth. And we always remind people to make their banners 9.5 feet long, not 10 feet long for a 10 by 10 tent, so that it'll stretch out and not, you don't have to wrap around your art. So we advise them to do one very on the front of the tent, very, very simple, fresh produce, just baked bread, something that is really, really obvious, because we have big markets. A lot of times we've got some small ones too, but as people walk through the aisles, there's a lot of shoppers there, and there's a lot of distractions from other booths. So you want to make it really, really easy to see what basic category you're in. And then we encourage them to have a more detailed banner at the back of their booth, you know, maybe 3 feet deep across the back, that maybe has pictures and that definitely has their name and their logo and their location of where their food's produced. So we think those are 2 important banners. Banners are so inexpensive now, full color banners, even with photos, whether you get them online or from a local printer. They're just super effective, and they're not expensive to do. But you are absolutely correct. Putting your signage on your tablecloth is not effective. Let's see, we're
Awesome.
rolling
I
up
think
here.
Liz-
About inventory, Jenny Effinger says, if I have a vendor who consistently sells out before teardown time, then I assume I can include another similar vendor. I'm absolutely in agreement with you on that. We look at that because we get such a crazy amount of baked goods vendors. And so we'll try to not over tip the balance. Obviously, when you're a market manager, the goal is to achieve balance, and you're always kind of watching for, can you give the consumer more choice, because consumers like that and it will increase your traffic. And at the same time, you don't want to cross that line where you have so many vendors in the same category that nobody's making money. But you are absolutely right. If you have a vendor who's consistently selling out, you definitely want to go ahead and look at other applications in that category and add more people that are offering that. It's still, to me, a waste of time for the vendor and frustrating for the customer to have somebody that's consistently selling out early. We definitely discourage that, because the customer gets frustrated when they drive down, race down after they've gotten off of work to get something and they're not there. It's especially for grocery products. The vendor is out. It frustrates the customers, and customers that are frustrated with a vendor, that shades the whole market. They're frustrated with the market, and they say, oh gosh, they never have what I need. I'm going to go to Trader Joe's. And when they go to Trader Joe's, while they're buying that dip that they wish they could have gotten at the farmer's market, they may find that Trader Joe's has produce and it's plastic wrapped and it's not as fresh and it's not as good, but hey, it's convenient, since they're going to have to go there anyway to get the item that they were looking for, that they were out of. So yeah, we really encourage people to make sure they've got enough inventory till the end of the day.
There's a question about clarifying the 9-inch deep sign. Should it go on the front?
In front of the tent, not on the table. That's why we make it 9 inches. So most 10 by 10 tents have a lip on the front. It is, and people overestimate how big that lip is. So we'll see people do those signs along the front and they print them at 1 foot or 2 feet, and that's too deep, because people will hit their heads on them. They won't be able to actually see into your booth. So we say 9 inches because you can usually use bungees to put that at the very top of your tent without obscuring the entrance to your tent. Definitely not on the table. Oh, people hit their heads on it. Yes, that's why 9 inches. Yeah, and not on the table. Tammy, I hope that makes sense.
A really great question from Roberta. Do you see any unfilled niche at markets?
So, it depends on the markets. So we have a running joke in our organization that if anybody ever shows up with an application to sell mustard, that I will push anyone else out of the market to get them in, because we don't have a single mustard vendor. And I go across the country and almost every market has this great variety of mustards. So it may be in your area that there's an unfilled niche. I do think there's a couple of things that would be helpful in terms of services. I think that somebody could do really well to bring in a prep booth. I find in particular that my kids and my granddaughter don't really know how to cut up a squash. So they will find themselves at a big box grocery store or at Trader Joe's where the produce is cut into little cubes and wrapped up with plastic. Wouldn't it be better if we could get them somebody at the market where you could buy produce and take it to this chef's tent and have it prepped for you so it's ready to cook when you get home? I think that would be really helpful. I think we're really missing the boat in a lot of markets on value-added products that would reduce waste for the farmers and still create convenience for the consumer. So farmers that are selling carrots and onions and those are easily storable, so not quite as obvious, but greens and tomatoes and herbs, if they would dehydrate those and chop them up and put them in a mix that somebody could throw into a soup, I think they would do really, really well. Our consumers now are keen to convenience. They've gotten used to meal kits and to those boxes that you get shipped that will give you exactly the amount of spices that you need. I see spices as an unfilled niche. I find that traveling across the country, very few markets have a vendor that sells spices. When we do an email newsletter recipe, we like to say, look, you can make this salad by picking up spinach from this farmer and onions from this farmer and citrus from this farmer and oil and vinegar. And I wish we could say, and then get a package of thyme and a package of, these herbs from somebody that was selling spices that were easy. So that's actually a really high margin product. We've had them a couple of times for various reasons. They have not lasted. We're out of them right now. I've seen some good ones in other markets. I also see markets that don't have any. So in terms of unfilled niches, I think that's one of them. Lee, your story about the coffee vendor is just scary. And yes, that's why we like to vet names for people that are using names that may be offensive and they just don't get it. Thank you for the comment on the necklace. We always say that if we wanted to ever start a market that was just jewelry, we could, because apparently there's only 3 people in San Diego County that don't make jewelry based on the number of applications that we get. But I love a good jewelry vendor. We just have a few too many of them. How do you get people to see price signs? And what does the Board of Health say about cutting produce outside? Not sure what you mean by how do you get people to see price signs, so feel free to elaborate on that. Board of Health and cutting produce outside in our area, which is really highly regulated, what they would need to do is put 3 screen walls around. We do have people that prep in their booths. That may not be the case where you are. I will apologize that I am not completely up on Indiana regulations in terms of health department. Can you not prep in your booth, Christina? You're shaking your head.
I don't know. I don't think that's ever been asked.
Okay. Do you not have prepared food vendors that say are shopping things
Yeah,
up?
we do have prepared food vendors. We do. But Lee.
I got the answer. Okay, so for we had a girl that did fruit smoothies, and so for her to prep in her area, she had to have it's like a $50 permit for every Saturday. So they would inspect her and stuff. It's not that you can't do it, it's just you have to be permitted to.
That's our case too. Yeah, so we've got to have, if you're doing any kind of prep, you got to have a temporary food facility permit. We actually have an exemption for farmers, so farmers can do it under their. We have ag permits for our farmers, though. It's a fairly strict state law, administered and interpreted and enforced by the counties. And so all of our farmers have to be inspected. They have to have a certified producer certificate. If they can show that they've got what they need in terms of hand wash stations and things, they can cut produce in their booths.
Yeah, we had a farmer that pulled out his pocket knife and was cutting an apple and handing people slivers, and I was just like,
that would be food.
Ours have to do more than that. They can cut and sample, but they have to.
Were you cutting rope yesterday? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's food sampling, and Sharon covered the process because they need to have a hand washing station set up in their booth and stuff. So
yeah, exactly.
But
so there's usually certain procedures they've got to follow and certain permits that they've got to have. And Gina's saying, as far as Jefferson County, you can't sell cut produce or produce that's been frozen or dehydrated unless it's done in a commercial kitchen space.
Right.
In our case, They used to require a commercial kitchen space. They now require either that or the farmer can use a cottage food permit in California now, which was fairly new here. That did not used to be the case.
Yeah, we didn't. The other part is that produce has to be, it's a potentially hazardous food, so it has to be time and temperature controlled for safety.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that becomes a problem midsummer when your temperatures go upper 80s and 90s and 100.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why we're not allowed to.
Yeah, what we see here is you've got to keep a log of when the sample was put out. You got to put the time on it, and then you have to pull it at a certain point because, again, temperature sensitivity and that. Rebecca, if you're on here, how do you get people to see price signs? I'm not sure I understand that. If you want to add to that, happy to answer.
Well, I do know, like, one of my favorite meat vendors, he has a chalkboard with the prices, and he also uses that to promote specials that they run. And
smart.
then like little signs for he's meat, poultry, eggs, so he'll have like signs for egg specials, like you get 2 dozen for $5 or something like that. So he does use a big chalkboard. And he has that. So and I think he may even have 2 chalkboards because they offer a lot of specials, depending on, like 4th of July special. But I found the chalkboard format works really well at the market because it's right in front of the booth space. So people can walk up and see it and they can read it.
Yeah, smart.
Yeah.
Soup with fresh bread. You bring the soup frozen. Kate, so my suggestion would require a couple of questions. I'm assuming that you're either in a pouch or a jar or something. My suggestion would be to either sacrifice a few soups each week to put them on the table, and they clearly will not be sold. They're just display. You can also, we have soup vendors that sell in pouches that have created empty pouches that have a photo of the soup on a piece of paper on the inside. So it's not the actual soup that's in there, but the customer can get a good idea of what the soup looks like when it's not frozen and it's not hidden in your cooler. So you can set up displays that way. You can definitely do little easel signs that have beautiful full color pictures of your soup in a bowl with the bread next to it so that people can get a sense of what your product looks like. Be sure you include a spoon in there. We had a great presentation at last year's Intense conference by El Simon from America's Test Kitchen that talked about how to take photos, and you want to be sure to put something in that photo that indicates there's a human attached. That spoon will do it. So that's a couple of suggestions. And if you have any more specific questions, as long as it's okay with Christina, I'm fine with people unmuting.
Oh, yeah.
Ask in more detail.
Definitely. We're on break for lunch. Yeah, the other options. Yeah. I mean, those are great recommendations for the frozen soup. Anything to make it look.
That frozen stuff is tricky. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. So you have to get
frozen
to make sure
but you want people to be excited.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I'm always excited about soup, but we have seen some creative things. And our soup vendors too tend to have a chalkboard that has the soups of the day listed, and they'll cross them out when they sell it of a particular variety. The other thing that our soup vendors have done, I've seen some folks do this with soups or with relish or that kind of thing, is do a small display with the fresh vegetables that are ingredients for those soups. So a basket that has those things piled up can really draw the eye to your table. Obviously you want to use the ingredients that are actually in your soup, but you can make a deal maybe with your local farmers to donate that produce, and you put a little sign that says, fresh vegetables from X farm. So you throw people again across the aisle between the farmers and the food vendors.
I think we've caught all of them.
I think so. I kind of cruised through. I don't see anything that we missed. If we did miss you, holler.
This has been wonderful.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you so much, Catt.
You're welcome. Always happy to come talk to y'all. Great engaged group.
Well, thank you all for hanging in there with us. Great questions. I appreciate that. We will reconvene at 1 o'clock with our next session, which is Farmers Market Metrics. What data are you collecting, with Dr. Alfonso Morales? So please join us.
Tell Alfonso I said hi.
I will. And thank you to Catt for a wonderful presentation.